Great. So we're recording. And yeah, so are you ready to begin then?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Let's go.
you're ready to go. Great stuff. Well, hi, Melanie. Welcome to the podcast this morning. To get started, could you say a little bit about yourself and your background, please?
I can do, yes. So I'm Melanie Cotton. I'm an ex-modern languages teacher, 25-year career, teaching French and Spanish to eager minds in secondary school. And 3 years ago, I retrained and became a freelance proofreader, which I've been doing full-time for 2 years. Set my business up 3 years ago, but did that part-time alongside teaching, and then packed in teaching just about 2 years ago.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated by that journey, particularly the journey from out of teaching into a new career. So I'd like to explore that with you today. First of all, so I can reflect on that, can you tell me about what motivated you in the first place to leave teaching and pursue a different career?
To leave teaching? Ultimately, because I had a breakdown. Leading up to that, I probably spent the last 10 years of my career thinking, I need to get out of this. It's not doing me any good mentally. But I just had no idea. You get institutionalized as a teacher. You tend to think that your skill set is only applicable to the classroom. And the whole media narrative is that teachers are a bit rubbish anyway. So you don't imagine that there would be any other sector that would want you. So I spent 10 years carrying on teaching. And I still did love teaching. Loads about it that I loved. I never fell out of love with being a teacher. I just fell out of love with the whole profession, the whole atmosphere, the whole environment that we were working in. So it got to the point where really I had no choice left. I had to get out for the sake of my own mental well-being and health. So yeah, I had a breakdown. I was off school for 5 months, and that gave me the to really reflect on no longer about should I get out, but how could I get out? I knew I would have to go back because I didn't have a plan in place, but I also knew that that would be very short term, that I would be on borrowed time really, because when I did go back, I was still far from well. So I spent part of my sort of healing and getting myself better again was starting to develop a plan for my exit, and looking at what my skills were and how I could use those and what my passions were. So yeah, that's how it came about really, which I think unfortunately and sadly is how so many people end up leaving teaching, is because they try for as long as they can, but it gets to the point where it's harder to stay than it is to go.
That must have been very difficult for you, Melanie, that imperative crisis even that you felt at that point in your career. When you look back, do you reflect on the journey of teaching? Do you think you changed during your teaching, or was it teaching that changed and therefore you ceased to enjoy it as much as you did previously? Or was it a combination of those things, you think?
Possibly a combination, but primarily the fact that the job had changed so much. I remember because I didn't go straight into teaching after I graduated from university. I spent 3 years not knowing what to do really. I always had in the back of my mind that I wanted to be a teacher, but unfortunately I've been very influenced by, well, my dad really, because he was one of those, I don't know why he thought this, because when he'd been at school, he'd sort of toyed with the idea of becoming a teacher, but didn't. But then I do remember him when I was a teenager saying things like those who can do and those who can't teach. So that really put me off it, even though in the back of my mind I thought that I did want to be a teacher. So when I graduated from university, I didn't have a plan, and I spent 3 years faffing around doing all sorts of dead-end jobs. And then eventually I thought, no, I do actually want to be a teacher. So I did my PGCE and started teaching. And I remember in my first year of teaching, I would walk around the school just smiling to myself, thinking, God, I'm so lucky to be doing this job. I love this job. And I really, really did. I loved the interaction with the kids. I loved those light bulb moments. And I still, all the way through the whole 25 years I was teaching, I loved standing in front of a classroom full of kids and watching the light bulbs come on, and them asking good questions that showed that they were thinking about what they were learning. But unfortunately, with the change in, because teaching like health is a political football, so every new government, every new education secretary wants to make their mark and sort schools out. So they make a lot of changes, and a lot of those changes seem to stifle a lot of what being a teacher was about. You know, when I first started, there were lunchtime clubs for things. There were after school clubs for things. You know, we used to have an hour and 10 minutes, I think it was, for lunch. By the time I left, we had 25 minutes. So people would willingly give up their lunch times to do clubs with the kids, and the after school clubs, and the trips, and the holidays abroad, and you know, but we didn't mind taking them in our school holidays, because it was a pleasure to do that, to broaden these kids' horizons. And trips out during the school week to things that, again, it was all about enrichment and adding value to the kids beyond the purely academic syllabus. But as time went on, and there was more and more emphasis on league tables and more emphasis on performance management and appraisal of staff, if you know that your performance management at the end of the year is going to hinge on children's results and how many of your kids are meeting their targets that are arbitrarily set based on their year 6 SATs in maths, English and science, then you're not going to want to take any time out of the classroom. You're too tired and jaded to give up your lunch times, and lunchtime's too short anyway. And it all became too much about, the whole emphasis seemed to be that the teachers were the enemy and they were the impediment to kids doing well. You know, every year GCSE results go up, but the narrative is always still that schools and teachers are letting kids down. And the parents, in my experience, I don't know if it's typical to my school, I suspect not, increasingly buy into that narrative that the teachers are the problem, not their parenting, not their children, not the government, not the politics, the teachers. And so increasingly, parents make more and more demands on your time. Especially, I did one term of teaching from home during lockdown, and the boundaries completely disappeared. I was working 3 days a week. If we'd still been in school, I would have been accessible to parents during my working days. But because we were teaching from home and we were emailing the work out, and the kids were doing the work whenever they got their turn on the family laptop or whatever, the parents would, and the kids would be emailing literally from 7 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, 7 days a week. And that is what really finished me off in the end, because my mental health wasn't that stable anyway, because I'd gone back in, and that just absolutely finished me off. That the increasing demands, but the default expectation was that the teacher was wrong.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I mean, you paint a very troubling picture of the situation for teachers in schools, and particularly if you've entered the profession with the expectation that, you know, you're going to be adding value to the children. It's going to be somewhere that you're going to really enjoy being. It's going to be somewhere where you're a valued member of the school, society, the community. All those things make it worthwhile. And that change over the years that you've seen, it does sound like it makes it quite a painful place to be in.
Absolutely. I spent my 24 hours a day with a hard knot of anxiety in my stomach that never went away. Never. Got to the point, where you would just dread opening your emails on a Monday morning when you got back into school because of what might have landed in your inbox over the weekend. And you're not going to get your best out of a staff of people if that's how they all feel. It's just like you're firefighting all the time, and that doesn't encourage, well, you just don't have the bandwidth left to put into doing the actual job to the best of your ability, because you're always second guessing yourself and thinking, who's going to complain if I do this? Who's going to complain if I set this homework, because I've already set a homework this week? And who's going to say I'm overdoing it? Who's going to complain that I didn't give their child a good enough grade for this homework, even though, have we got that?
Yeah. And I think the other thing about this is that, so to listen to you now, some people might think, well, why don't you just leave? Why don't you just leave the school or leave teaching? And I think the thing with teaching, like many vocational professions, and more so than most actually, it is difficult to leave for a number of reasons. Vocations are always difficult to leave anyway, because you've trained, you've educated yourself, you really are in that profession to an extent that it's very difficult to get yourself back out again easily. So that's one thing. You're pinned by the expectations of your current crop of pupils, the teachers, that your colleagues, the parents that are relying on you, the general community aspect of being a teacher. It makes it very difficult to just walk away, doesn't it?
It really does, yeah, because you are emotionally invested in those children. You couldn't do the job properly if you weren't. And in a sense, yeah, when you think about leaving, you do think that you're abandoning your classes and jeopardizing their chance of doing as well as they could because of the disruption of having to get used to a new teacher, your replacement. But also your confidence is so low because it's reinforced to you every day how you're not quite doing it well enough. My school, my department, our GCSE results were the best subject in the school, and we were the best modern languages department in the education authority, but we still weren't allowed to feel like we were quite good enough. And so because your confidence is so low, you think, well, who else is going to want me? Short of going and stacking shelves in a supermarket, who is going to want me in a professional capacity if I'm not even good at the thing that I'm trained for? So that's what I think deters an awful lot of people. And walking away from a pretty safe job with a pension at the end of it, it is a big deal. Nobody goes into teaching thinking, people who go into teaching for the right reasons don't imagine it's going to be a short-term career. They think, I thought that would be it. My whole teaching life or my whole working life, I would be a teacher. And it really, I don't know, it's hard to come to terms with the fact that might not end up being the case. And you fight against it and you're in denial, I think, for quite a while before you do then start to really, the balance tips at a certain point, like it did for me with breakdown, but the balance tips, and it's almost like you have to reinvent your whole identity because you've seen yourself as, you're not working as, you are a teacher. It's cut a teacher in half and it's like rocket runs all the way through teacher. So to change that is a massive mindset shift.
Yeah. And also I think it's difficult for you to, like other professions can leave one organization and go to a different organization and have a different culture, have a different experience, and start to enjoy the profession again. Teaching is pretty homogenous, isn't it, in terms of one school and another? The Ofsted's,
if you're in the state sector,
yeah. So well, let me ask you: did you consider moving to another school or looking at a different role in education?
Again, no, because better the devil you know in a lot of ways. Because I'd been there for so long, I did have, after a few years, you stop being the newbie and kids know your reputation and they know what to expect from you. So they don't so much try and push you because they know, because you've been around for a while. And then obviously after another considerable while, you get the kids coming in saying, you used to teach my mum or you used to teach my dad. And so they, you're really established, you've got the reputation, and to move somewhere new and to have to go through that whole rebuilding that reputation again didn't appeal to me. And also, obviously teachers know a lot of teachers. And I would hear even worse stories from a lot of people that I knew about where they were. And when you go for an interview, obviously there's a job going, they want to fill that job, so they're going to show you the best face of the school. And it's only once you get in there that you find out that maybe the grass wasn't greener. And I'm afraid I'm not very good with change. And I just chickened out for all those reasons, really. I suppose, and also, God, applying for jobs, filling in application forms and writing letters, an interview. When you go for an interview, it's a full day. And you have to teach a lesson under observation. You have, and these days you're grilled by the student council because pupil voice matters, student voice matters. You're grilled by, the governors and the senior management team, and you have to do all these, and it's a full day. And I just could not face putting myself through all of that. And then at the end of it, and you find out on the day whether or not you've got the job, you all have to sit there, all the candidates, and wait for them to come in and say, you, please come through. Everybody else will be debriefed shortly. I just couldn't face putting myself through any of that.
Yeah, that's understandable.
Yeah,
and I had this impression that in teaching that there's a large number of teachers probably feeling the same way as you, that are almost tiptoeing the way to the end. And it's sad to think of that, isn't it? That actually that they're not enjoying the role, but they're not quite sure how to get out of it.
exactly.
And it shouldn't have to come to a breakdown situation, should it, for someone to have their eyes open to make the change, to have the imperative to change. And I wonder whether is that one of the reasons that you started your YouTube channel, to help people to make a change?
Definitely. That was my main motivating factor, because I thought to myself, once I'd made the break and retrained, set my business up and got going, and I started meeting so many other ex-teachers in the freelance world, who were all doing such a range of new careers. And I thought, God, if only I'd known 10 years ago what the possibilities were, I would definitely have done something about it sooner. And maybe I wouldn't have ended up in the state that I did. And if maybe I could help bring that knowledge to serving teachers who are, maybe at the stage that I was at, or hopefully before they get to that stage, to show them what the possibilities are out there, then I felt it was something worthwhile doing. So I did think about it for a long time, because again, it's way outside my comfort zone. But once I'd started working as a freelance and doing a lot of networking, because it was, still a lot of networking was online, because we were in sort of like the post-COVID, post-pandemic lockdown type scenario, I was doing an awful lot of online networking. So when you're doing that, like we are now, I have to sit and stare at my face. And that puts me right outside my comfort zone, because, anyway. But once I'd been doing that for a while, I thought, well, actually, that's not so bad. Now I know what I look like when I'm talking, because it's something you never see, is it, in normal life? Mm-hmm. You look in the mirror, you know what your face looks like, but you don't know what you look like when you're in conversation. So once I'd got used to that, I thought, yeah, I think I can probably film myself. Although, having said that, once I've uploaded them and they've gone live, I'll check them to make sure they're there, but I can't watch them.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's quite common, actually, isn't it? That we don't like to watch ourselves or hear ourselves back. And, we sometimes have to do it for, quality purposes, but it's not enjoyable, is it?
Now, apparently, even, famous people, I was watching an interview with Keira Knightley the other day. She doesn't watch her own films. She hates seeing herself. So it's not just me. Me and Keira Knightley. I've got something in common with her. The one thing I have in common. Anyway, so that was why I set up Roots Out of Teaching, because I thought, however many teachers I'm able, or ex-teachers rather, I'm able to get to contribute to it, if between us we just help one person to get out before it's at crisis point, then it's been worth it.
And it's a really good channel. I've watched the interviews. I really enjoy them, and you're really adding value to the conversation. I want to just ask you about something, because you used a word there before, which is one of my favorite words when it comes to changing your career or changing your job, and that was possible. And I have this thing about, when we're changing a career, we have to have a few mindset shifts. And one of them is the mindset of possibility, that actually change is possible for me. And you have to sort of get your head in that mind space, because quite often we don't have that mindset. We think, I can't change, I'm stuck being a teacher. There's no hope for me in the future, and I will not be able to move out of this particular school. And that's not true. It is possible for you to move away from that particular school and teaching, and there's lots of other things you can do outside of teaching. So that mindset and what you're talking about on your channel is vital.
Yeah, and I think we get institutionalized working in the public sector, and you think that is your niche, and that's it, really. And the whole seeing what's possible, and definitely the mindset shift is a huge thing. And I had to do quite a lot of work, because don't get me wrong, once I decided to leave and had left and set up my business and was working full-time as a freelance, there are a lot of things you still struggle with. It's not a given that all your problems will go away, because it throws up different issues, but you're in control of those issues then. So various things I struggled with initially were things like finding clients. Once I'd found some clients, finding more clients, getting repeat clients, looking at my diary and seeing it's fully booked. Brilliant. And then there might be patches where it's not. And just coping with that kind of thing, knowing that the work will come and not panicking if you've got some days where there isn't anything in. But what I can cope with it because it's for me, I'm in control of it, because I know what's possible, because I know I am doing it. And I know now that I've joined the freelance community that there are so many people who, not just me, loads, hundreds of other people who have done it. When I post about my YouTube channel on LinkedIn and on other social media, the number of people who I've known as a copywriter or a life coach or a this or a that say, actually, yeah, I used to be a teacher. And it's not like we all have a little sign on the forehead saying ex-teacher. It's not as though there's, just some aura that we emanate that makes it obvious. So there's all these people, I had no idea that they were teachers, because why would you just mention it in passing? You wouldn't necessarily. So yeah, I think increasingly meeting more and more people like that does, like you say, show the possibilities. But for me, it was a very big thing, from sitting here waiting on the waiting list for CBT, thinking, God, what can I do? But once you do, I don't know, it's just a little switch. And once that switch has been flicked, and you open your mind to exploring, that's a powerful moment.
Yeah, and some people have that powerful moment in a sort of blinding flash. That's what happened to me. Some people have to go through a crisis. Some people, they're made redundant, and therefore they have a time where they're rethinking their career and their life. We often have to get to a point where everything changes, and that point then it becomes easier then for you to look at what's next, because this is about identity, and you change your identity. And while you have the identity of that I'm a teacher and I'll always be a teacher and I'll never be anything different from a teacher, it is very difficult to see yourself in any other walk of life. And moving away from that and having an identity of, no, there's other things I can do, and there's other opportunities for me, that changes everything. And it just getting to that point where you can see that, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the weird thing is, now when I look back at my teaching career, it's like it was somebody else's life. I can barely even remember what it feels like to stand in a classroom. And it's not been that long in the scheme of things, given how long I taught for. And now, yeah, I don't, you know, initially people would say, oh, what do you do? And I say, oh, I'm a freelance proofreader, but I used to be a teacher. I don't bother with that bit now. It's just, yeah, I'm a proofreader. That is now my identity.
Yeah.
Um,
So
yeah.
you've done quite a few interviews already for your channel. So what are the sort of common challenges that people are describing, and what sort of things are helping them to make a change and move out of teaching so far?
Yeah. So I think the biggest challenge is finance. The financial aspect is having a sufficient buffer to keep themselves while they retrain, or set up the business and start trying to find clients. So having that financial buffer and holding their nerve while they're doing the establishing bit. But I think the people I've spoken to so far were pretty clear about what they wanted to do. Once they got to the point of being, yeah, I'm ready to leave, it's because they did know what they wanted to go in to do, which had sort of, in a lot of cases, had come to them, well, in some cases by serendipity. It's just like, or just by somebody outside giving them the idea. For example, several of the copywriters I've spoken to, it was people who knew, because they were English teachers largely. So people who knew they were English teachers. So people in their personal networks who were setting up their own businesses knew they were English teachers and said, I need something writing for my new website, for my new business. You're an English teacher. Will you please write it for me? And that set them on the path. Now, the ironic thing is for me, what sowed the seed in my mind that I could be a proofreader was we got a new head teacher about 6 years before I finished. And at the end of her first term, as we approached the Christmas holiday, she wrote a letter to the parents talking about how that term had been and looking forward to the rest of the school year. And she emailed it out to staff before it went out to the parents. And I noticed that in it she'd written, as we reached the halfway point of the school year. And I thought, hang on a minute, it's only Christmas. We're not halfway there. So I emailed her PA and said, I don't know if this is an oversight or, deliberate or whatever, but I'm just thinking this might be a bit confusing for parents. So she said, oh, I'll feed that back to the head. So the next thing I know, I've got an email. The head says, will you please check all of the letters that she sends out to parents to make sure that this kind of thing doesn't slip through the net again, because you've obviously got an eye for it. So ironically, the head sowed the seed in me for what I could. I mean, it took me another 6 years, but that planted that seed. And I sort of knew that a proofreader was a thing, that it did exist. I'd read a novel where the main character was agoraphobic and was a proofreader. And I remember thinking, oh, that must be a nice job. Oh, I could do that. But I didn't know any more about it than that. But then with this issue, yeah. So I suppose that just sort of stewed away in the back of my brain, in my subconscious for all that time. So when it came to the point when I was on sick leave and I was thinking about it, I didn't have to do too much thinking to come up with what I wanted to do. But I think some people possibly know that they need to get out and feel that they do have transferable skills. And that's where what you do would be really helpful, to help them to find that path, to be quite analytical and objective about, because most of the people I've spoken to so far, they've gone with their heart for what they wanted to move into. But if people don't have that idea already, some guidance about how they could transfer their skills, because what a lot of teachers don't realise is they're not just subject specialists, they're relationship specialists, they're conflict resolution specialists, they're training specialists, they're language specialists. They have so many different aspects: planning, organisation, working to deadlines, so many skills that are massive use. And you don't even have to become a freelancer. you could move into an alternative paid employment, but in the corporate sector, so yeah, I think so the financial thing of wondering how long they can survive for before they really need to start generating some new income, or for other people, because obviously if you're moving into another type of employment, that financial barrier isn't there, but it's who would want me, what employment could I do? So that was a
And
very long-winded answer to
no,
the question. Yeah, they're the barriers.
that's right. And I think often we think that career change can just be a quick big bang. I'll end my teaching job at the end of July or whenever, and I'll start working somewhere else in August or September. And it can happen. That can happen, of course, and it can happen throughout the year as well, to a certain extent. Less so with teaching. But I've lost my thought now. Was going to say? I've completely forgot what I was going to say, Melanie. It's gone out of my head. It'll come back in a second.
Age. That's what
It is definitely age, actually. What was I going to say there? I was going to mention.
I've said that financial barrier or moving into employment, not knowing what you could do job wise, what other employer might want you.
Yeah. Well, one thing I was going to say to you, actually, as you were talking, I did wonder what you thought your superpower was.
Oh, you posted about superpowers on LinkedIn this morning.
And it's International Women's Day today as well. So, it's what do you think your superpower is?
My superpower, organisation. I'm so organised. I've always been known for that. Super duper organised. Yeah.
Do you?
Well, in terms of being, managing your own diary as a teacher, you have the timetable. You are given that timetable on the first day of term in September, and you cannot vary from it. And the day is punctuated by bells. So you do need to be organised, because obviously you've got to be in the right place at the right time. You've got to plan your lessons. You can't have 30 kids walking in and have nothing to do with them. You've got to plan your lessons. You've got to plan the homework. You've got to plan when you're going to spend the time setting the lesson, planning the lessons, producing the resources, planning the time when you're going to mark the book. So you do develop organisational skills like that. But I think I naturally am just very organised. So then when you become self-employed, okay, so you don't have a timetable and you don't have the bells, but you've got those organisational skills from having to manage your own time outside of the 5 structured hours of the day. And so as a freelancer, obviously, you've got to plan when you're going to do your work and make sure that your diary works. I can't say yes to 3 books for the same week. So you've got to plan out, and say to a client, yes, I can take on that series of blog posts or that book or that white paper, but it will be in, on an X date or in so many weeks' time or whatever. And juggling, so this client hasn't really got a strict deadline, so I can move them back a bit so I can fit in this client who has got a very strict deadline. So yeah, I tend to be quite good at organising. The only problem that I do find with that is I'm still not in the mindset of saying no to people. So, I'll be looking at my diary and thinking, hey, I'm full at the moment. That's really good. And then somebody will email me and say, can you just fit this in? Yeah, of course I can. So it's not that I'm not organised. It's just I'm a bit too keen, too optimistic about how many hours there are in the day.
Have you always been good on social media? Because I think that is another one of your superpowers that maybe you're not aware of.
No, I had to learn that. I was a very, very late adopter of Facebook, even in my personal life. I think I only joined Facebook about 5-6 years ago. And really liked it, really enjoyed it. And then when I set up my business, and it's like, okay, so how do I get clients? Joined LinkedIn, started reading what people were doing on there, followed some of the gurus, listened to people who knew what they were talking about, And it's just been trial and error, and I've just learned how to do what I do as I've gone on. And I do enjoy it now. I really enjoy writing my posts, thinking of things to post about, because I mean, God, writing about grammar, big yawn. So it's how to make that interesting and entertaining for people, but also, you know what it's like, how to get the hook at the start of the post to make people want to click on see more to read the rest of the post. I like that challenge, and I do like writing them, and I like the conversations that then go on in the comments, and I like commenting on other people's posts and building those relationships. I really enjoy that. Can take up a massive chunk of your day if you're not
Mm.
careful.
You do get an awful lot of engagement. Sorry, you do get an awful lot of engagement in your on your post, don't you? That's why I think it is one of your superpowers, because that engagement will drive interest in your services, and I'm sure it does. And you don't have to share how much of an impact that is. But you know, we don't work in isolation. We've got to find customers, and that's probably one of the ways you do find work.
Yeah, I would say in percentage terms, about 45% of my income comes from networking, referral marketing, networking type stuff. About 45% comes from LinkedIn. And the remaining 10% is just completely random. People tagging me in Facebook groups or recommending me in Facebook groups that they're in. I've had some good recommendations that way. And just, yeah, friends, people who know me outside, any of that. So yeah, it's worth the time that I put into it. It does. I mean, I use Instagram and Facebook as well. I repurpose my LinkedIn posts to make them a bit more sort of appropriate for those platforms, which doesn't take a massive amount of time. I haven't had any results from that yet. I've only been doing it this year, since January. That was one of my targets for this quarter. But it doesn't take that long to do, so I figure I might as well. You never know, another market to tap. Because it's too easy when you're busy to think, oh, I can ease off the marketing now. It's worked. No, you have to keep on doing it, otherwise the leads dry up.
Yeah. The reason why I took you down that discussion really was to emphasize that we often think we know what our superpower is, and you know, you're quite accurate with saying, you know, you're organized, etc. But when you change into a new career, quite often you find there are things that you've never done before that you do really well, and so this helps with the identity change, doesn't it? That knowing that if you take responsibility for your career, you're open to the idea and the possibility of doing something more enjoyable, that you're going to use those skills in different ways, and you're going to have new superpowers. So I think it's good to know that. And I've remembered actually what I've forgotten. So so just harking back, it does tie in actually. I was just saying, wasn't I, that it links back to, you know, leaving school in one big leap, if you like, and that can happen. But quite often you have to create stepping stones. So you might have an idea of where you want to be, but you can't get there in one step, and therefore you create like linking stepping stones that you take to get there. So that can be one route. Now the idea is to make the stepping stones equally enjoyable, so it's an enjoyable path to where you want to get to. But people often think either that they'll have a big flash of inspiration, they'll know what they want to do, and therefore, you know, they'll move to that occupation, that career, you know, next month, or you know, that they'll be able to make a leap somewhere in one go. And it's quite often, it's very difficult to think your way into a new career, and it's very difficult to make a leap straight away into that particular role. You often have to think strategically about the steps you take. So that's where probably getting support from a professional does help, because they can help you to create, design, and map the steps that get you from where you are, and have the finances to do that to get you where you want to be. And so you have to be a little bit tactical with this, don't you?
Absolutely, yeah. Because I think if you think you're going to go from doing whatever it is has been your career up to now, and suddenly you're just going to step into a ready-made successful career of something else, when that doesn't happen, it would be very demoralizing and will probably send you scurrying back to your place of safety, i.e. back to, you know, there are some, I'm not going to lie, there are people I've talked to who have tried to get out of teaching and it hasn't worked because they've thought or imagined, hoped that they would step into something ready-made and that would just work. So they've ended up going back and doing supply teaching, and then some have gone back into full-time teaching, some have reevaluated and then tried again, but like you said, breaking it down into small steps. So yeah, I didn't just wake up one morning and think, I am now a proofreader. I did my research, I did my due diligence, I looked into how to get qualified, because although it is a totally unregulated industry, if I'm going to do something, I want to do it properly and I want to do it well. And I'm not the sort of person who could just fake it until I've made it and just say to people, yeah, I'm a proofreader, and charge them good money when I wasn't providing a high quality service. So I joined the professional body, the Chartered Institute of Editing and Proofreading. I did all the proofreading training they have available, which is very rigorous, and you have to pass assessments. And that took me a year. So from deciding, yes, I want to be a proofreader, to actually being able to look in the mirror and say, you are now a proofreader, it took me a year. But then that was only the start, even once I'd done that year, because then I had to get experience. So I did quite a lot of pro bono work for charities and for students doing this, you know, friends whose kids were at undergraduate age doing their dissertations. So I could build up a significant number of hours of practice and experience before I actually started charging money for it. So I saw each one of those things, rather than going from 0 to 100 miles an hour, if you like, from standing start to being a fully fledged proofreader, I took it in very little steps. And I think that made it a lot more manageable for me and less daunting, because I only had to look at the next step. Although obviously the end goal was a freelance proofreading business, I've just looked at the next step. So I've got to do this training course, which is this many hours and this many assessments. And that was all I looked at until I'd done that. And then I looked at the next training course. And once I'd finished the third training course, then I looked at setting up my business. And when I was thinking about that, it was right, start to get myself known digitally, because that's how everybody markets themselves these days. The obvious thing, website. So I just concentrated on building a website. I would not do that again by myself. That is a massive tip to anybody. Don't build your own website. Just pay somebody. Oh my God, days of my life I am not going to get back. And I didn't have grey hair when I started trying to build my website. Look at it now. No, I did. I've been grey for years. Anyway, yeah. So then, and once I'd got the website, then I felt like I existed as a business, because I could say to people, oh yeah, go and look at my website. And the buzz I got the first time I said to somebody, go and look at my website, it's like, oh my God, I've got a website. But yeah, all those small steps, definitely, because if you just look at the final step of the business, that's very intimidating. That's going to put you off.
Yeah. I don't know. Also, I know it's risky, or it may seem risky, but sometimes you have to start before you know the actual end destination. I know now some people might disagree with that, but actually you have to move towards the thing you're interested in, to understand more about it, to learn more about yourself, to see the new doors that are going to open for you. The thing isn't fully formed when you're where you are. So you have to move towards it. That might mean doing some work on the side. It might mean getting a qualification. It might mean doing some shadowing, talking to people, informational interviewing people, getting a career coach, whatever it might be. It's about getting nearer to the action that you're interested in, because you can't figure these things out by just staying where you are. Unfortunately, it doesn't really work like that. And I think that's the hardest challenge that people, one of the hardest challenges people have, that they want to think of what the solution is in the head before they're willing to make a first step. And it just doesn't work like that.
No. And I think that probably is what puts a lot of people off actually doing anything, is because they don't think about the steps. They just, it's like this great gulf between where they are and what they would like their end goal to be. and because they don't think about the steps, it seems unachievable. But yeah, I mean, I've interviewed some people. One particularly springs to mind who, when she got out of teaching, thought that she was going to do one certain thing, pursued that, it didn't work. But she, so okay, so now she's trying something else. And once you do, I mean, even once I set up my proofreading business, I imagined when I was doing the training that I would just work on books for the big publishers. I don't work for any big publishers. Turns out it's ridiculously hard to get on their freelance lists. So I haven't even bothered trying. So even my initial business wasn't what I thought it was going to be while I was training. But since then, once I got going and was proofreading, yes, I do books, but I work for independent publishers and self-publishing authors. But I didn't know proofreading for business existed. I had no idea. But 50% of my work is marketing and comms, reports, white papers, stuff for businesses, their social media content, their blogs, web copy, all of that. I had no idea about that when I started training. But I wouldn't have a business if I didn't work with business. And so once I got going with all of that, which wasn't what I imagined it would be when I started, but was, and then after a couple of years, loving it as I do, absolutely love it, reading all day, what's not to love, God. And sometimes being the first person to read a book other than the author. Can you imagine the privilege? But then I started to feel like there was a little bit of something missing. And it was because, yeah, I am a teacher at heart, not because I worked as a teacher for 25 years, but because I love sharing knowledge. And so I was finding that, I'd send work back to the client with all the track changes so they could see absolutely every single thing I'd changed, because it's up to them whether or not they accept them. And I always say in my email, if you've got any questions about what I've done, get back to me. And so few do. And so, for example, say somebody has used semicolons, and every time they've used a semicolon, I've had to change it because they've used it inappropriately. Now, if that was me getting that back, I would want to know what I've been doing wrong with semicolons, but they don't ask. And I really, really want to tell them. I mean, okay, if they carry on doing semicolons wrong, it's more work for me, but I want to share knowledge with them. And they don't ask. So it was that aspect that was missing. So then done something that I never in a million years imagined would be part of my role as a proofreader. I now offer grammar training to businesses. So, businesses who send out, they're not in the business of words, but they use a lot of them in emails to clients, for example, or writing reports to clients. And they don't have the time in their systems. I mean, can you imagine a firm of accountants having every email they send to clients proofread? That's just not going to happen. But they've got a professional image to maintain. They need to be communicating clearly, succinctly, in good English, plain English with their clients, and they aren't necessarily doing that. So I offer training to those businesses to make sure that that happens. So that sort of scratches the itch of me wanting to share knowledge. But that's not something I ever imagined that I would be doing 3 years ago when I set my business up.
Yeah.
So you do evolve, but I didn't think, oh, I'm going to start training. I did small steps about, what could this training look like? Who would it be for? How would I do it? So it's workshops. What would these workshops look like? How would I structure them? So then it's back to lesson planning again. So there's transferable skill coming in. But yeah, I didn't go, I'm going to be a trainer. Boom, it's happened. Small steps to get there. So yeah, but that's the good thing you do find as well, or I found, that once you've gone freelance and set up your own business, your ability to innovate seems to be enhanced. And you do get ideas about how to drive your business forward. I never thought I'd have the YouTube channel. All right, it's not for my business, it's a side thing. But again, I had that big idea, but I broke it down into small steps. How am I going to achieve this? And I've just launched a newsletter for my business. Never thought I'd do that. that was way outside my comfort zone as well. But, you know, email marketing, people do it. Why shouldn't I? So instead of going from naught to I will have a newsletter, it's like, okay, so how am I going to have this newsletter? Well, I'm going to need to build a mailing list. How do I do that? I have no idea. So instead of wasting days of my life working out how to use MailerLite, I just paid somebody to do it for me. That's another thing. Understanding and recognizing when it's more cost effective to just pay somebody else to do the thing for you, because it took her 2 hours. VA took her 2 hours, set me up, brilliant. It would have taken me days.
Yeah, and I don't know what. Yeah, I agree, and I don't know why we don't often think to use professionals in the first instance. We often try and do it ourselves, don't we? Save some money, but you know what? Most of the time, it's better if you can get a professional to give you some support. And you know, there's lots of professionals out there. Whether it's supporting you with a piece of work you've got, I use them with my work. You know, creating questionnaires and forms and stuff that are really interactive and work really well, rather than me trying to do it and making a mess of it. Or even just, you know, getting a professional to help you in your career, because it's a big decision, changing career, and doing that on your own is difficult as well. So you're better reaching out to get some support, and there's so much good support around that, you know, you'd be daft not to at least have a conversation with somebody about what they could offer.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, when you think about the amount of money that we are prepared to spend on stuff in our lives,
Yeah,
that doesn't matter a damn in the scheme of things. You know, if you added up how much all of you, I don't know, your Netflix, your Amazon Prime, your whatever
coffee.
subscriptions
Yeah,
cost you, your Starbucks on the way to work every day, your takeaways, you add all that stuff up over the course of a month, probably hundreds of pounds. Using somebody to help change the course of your life for the better has got to be worth more than that. You know, when I was ill and I did loads of CBT, NHS CBT, which sort of scratched the surface a bit, but didn't really help. So I decided to invest in hypnotherapy, which brilliant, game changer, but it wasn't cheap. But I was talking to a life coach about it. It's like, oh, I don't know if I can afford this. And she said, if your car broke down, you would pay whatever it cost to get it fixed, wouldn't you? Aren't you worth more than your car? And so if you can invest in the support to help you to change your life for the better, why on earth wouldn't you? You
exactly.
know, but again, that's a big mindset shift. You don't notice the money when you're frittering it away a bit here, a bit there, and it just goes out of your bank account for your subscriptions on a standing order. But yeah, somebody says, I can do this for you, but it will cost X £100. You go, oh, that's a lot of money. Actually, no. In terms of the rest of your life, it's really not.
Yeah, I want to sort of start to draw the conversation to a conclusion, because I want to be respectful of your time. And so I'm very interested and curious to know what advice you would give teachers in particular that wanting to leave the profession. You know, what give me like 2 or 3 tips, if you like, that they can take away today that will really help them to look at the options for their future.
Okay, so the main one I would say is believe in yourself. You have so much to offer outside of education. Don't be put off by your last performance management results or what senior management are telling you. You have got so much to offer. And believe in yourself that you can make the change. So take the step. Do it gradually if you need to. Go part-time if you can. Leave and do supply. But, you know, take the step. You will, once you've done it, you will wonder why you hesitated. You know, when I look back now, I can't believe how far I've come. I feel like I'm a completely reborn person, and that's priceless. So yeah, have faith in yourself and take the step.
Great advice. And the work you're doing with your Roots Out YouTube channel is really helping in that conversation, and I'm sure people are really finding value in that. So, I appreciate that, what you're doing. I'm sure other people do as well.
Thank you.
Melanie, how can people find you? Where's the best way to connect with you?
Oh, well, crikey, where can't they? So my website is www.argentumproofreading.co.uk. My email is melanie@argentumproofreading.co.uk. I'm on LinkedIn as Melanie Cotton. I'm on Instagram and Facebook as Argentum Proofreading.
You're everywhere. You're everywhere, aren't you?
Google me. Pages of me. Pages.
And I'll put a link to all those places that people can find you in the show notes, so people will have that to connect to you, and do that, and check out the YouTube channel. I do recommend that.
Well, yeah, the YouTube channel as well. Yeah. Roots Out of Teaching.
Yeah,
is also on Instagram as Roots Out and Facebook as Roots Out of Teaching.
Excellent. Melanie, thank you very much for coming along today to talk to me. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and wish you best in the future.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mark.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
Good. That went well, didn't it?
I talk a lot. See, I never knew I talked a lot, but I talk a lot. People always use in social situations, people sound dead quiet, which I am. I don't remember if I used to be, but I am now. But yeah, interview me and I just don't shut up.
Were those questions okay for you?
Yeah, absolutely fine.
Yeah. I didn't know about your breakdown. I'm sorry to hear about that, Melanie.
It's not something, if I'd broken my leg or have cancer, I'd talk about it. So it's just an illness. It's not like any other. I'm not shy about mentioning it, but it's so common in teaching. I used to sit in staff meetings and look around and think, you're on happy tabs, you're on happy tabs. And, I could list the number of people who are on antidepressants. It could be half the room. And the ones who weren't had probably been at some point in the past or weren't far off going to the GP for them. It's so common.
Yeah. And it's difficult going through that. I suppose looking back on that episode, it did change your life, didn't it?
Oh God, yeah, it really did. Because that was the point. I said, I've got to get out, or it'll kill me, literally. It was, I mean, I don't bang on about it too much on public forums, but when you have got the best French GCSE results in the entire sodding county, and your head of department says to you, I thought they'd do better than that. How could your confidence not be at rock bottom? So yeah, it's that, and can you imagine people whose results aren't that good, the pain they're getting from their senior management
and the parents?
Oh yeah. So I can't remember what your question was then.
Well, it doesn't matter because so we're going to have a 5-minute break, and then we're going to come back and do the other half, aren't we?
So what I really emphasize. I mean, we can talk a bit about, because I didn't realize you'd had several transitions. So I think that's, I mean, like you talking about superpowers and stuff, I think anything that shows people that you can change is useful. So we'll talk about that a bit. But mainly I want it to be about how you as a career coach can help those teachers who want to get out but don't have any idea what they want to do. Because as well as the channel, as well as it being ex-teachers and how they've done it, I also want to do interviews with people who can help, who are useful in that journey. And even, I mean, some teachers actually, they want help to stay in teaching. So I'm hoping to find like mental health and wellbeing practitioners who can talk about, I've got one lined up already, how to help people